Welcome to the Wealth Workshop. Whether it's investing, retirement, or building generational wealth, we're here to simplify it all. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy this episode with your host, Terrified of AI.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Wealth Workshop. I'm extremely excited, and I know I say that every episode, but today especially because this is the first episode where it's not just an interview of the After Hour community members. I do really, really love those interviews, and I get a lot out of them, and I know a lot of the listeners here do as well. But today we have a different kind of episode for you. We're going to be talking about AI and its influence on the marketplace. So today, I don't want to take too much of my time because I am, one, terrified, and two, not an expert. But I have two experts, what I would consider to be experts, on the call with us today and for this episode. So I have Alloy and DoubleDownToWin on today's episode, and we're going to talk about the current state of AI in the markets and trading, what the future of AI in the markets and trading might look like, and then maybe some risks and challenges that might come along with the markets, because markets are generally efficient in the long term, but inefficient in the short term. But with AI, that could make them very efficient in the short term. So I'm excited to dive into that as well. But I wanted to give each of you the opportunity to introduce yourself, and I know you've both already done interviews, so thank you for that. But maybe a chance to introduce yourself and talk a little bit more about your background in the tech space and all of that. And DoubleDownToWin, let's start with you.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So Double Down to Win. I've been with After Hours for a couple months now, mid-late October. My background, I own a cybersecurity company and am creating a AI, I hesitate to call it a trading bot. It's more of advanced trading journal, focusing mostly on just training the trader. But I digress. It's still working on beta, so I won't throw too much out there, but stocks may coming soon. Alloy here.
Yeah, thanks for teeing me up. So I've been a data scientist for 10 years. About 8 years ago, transitioned into deep learning, classically educated in artificial intelligence and machine learning. Although a lot has changed since my education, we're training bigger models with huge data sets now, like terabytes of data, and we're actually getting good results out of those things now to create emergent technologies like large language models, time series models that use channels of data like volume, price. It could be sensors. You could train a model out of pretty much anything lately and get a really good result out of that model on a pretty consistent basis. So that's what I've been doing for Fortune 100 companies for about 10 years now. And it's been exciting. I have developed a product called Digits back in the day. There's a pretty big community still centered around the old version of that product, and it's kind of taken on a new life as the market has evolved. And I developed it during COVID. A lot of, you could call it free time to chase my dreams and build a product that I can consistently maintain. Because if you work in tech and you know there's a big difference between creating something and putting it in production and maintaining it. And that was a big cultural shift for the country that kind of caught me off guard when we were all forced to go back into the office, and now there's remote and there's hybrid work schedules, or it's been difficult to kind of get my bearing as a professional who has a business on the side. But I'm in a fortunate and blessed position where I work remotely these days, and so the newest version of it is called Prism, and Prism is a fun name that I adopted for the newer version of it. That just means, to me, taking a bunch of data and distilling it through a prism to see multiple angles of that data. And that's really emblematic inside of Prism, right? The application itself. You can create different charts. You can look at data in a number of ways. You can look at historical. There's great stuff that quantitative funds are using, like order flow, that's available through Prism. There is an AI built into the sidebar, so you can talk to ChatGPT or other models. And we've got a great Discord channel where you can actually speak to the AI and she speaks back to you in a pretty pleasant and calming voice, which I think we all need in this volatile market. So that was a fun addition that we did. And you can ask her questions about your entries and your exits, and she'll grab price data for you, information online, and slap it right in the Discord for you to download. So there's the app online that you can actually use, and it's not unlike Thinkorswim, but a little bit more cutting edge and mobile friendly. Like you can use it on your phone very easily, and Thinkorswim, if you know, then you know, it's not a great application to use on mobile. And so I'm really trying to do it. I think what Robinhood has done for trading, I'm just bringing the quantitative analysis aspect of trading into people's pockets as well. And I initially started streaming it because it was just a thing that I had on my laptop that I was desperately in need of. And then over time, people started asking for it. So I had a Discord already, and I was slowly inviting people in there just to discuss theses and ideas about the market. And then it became necessary to kind of create some a community who could report bugs, all that good stuff. Again, going back to maintaining a product is increasingly feasible as I have a little bit more personal freedom to actually operate a business. And that's sort of where I'm at. It's in beta. We plan to be out of beta by early March. And that's thanks to all the people who are telling me what I've done wrong in the code or the way it works or any minor performance issues. They've all really helped it kind of come alive. So thank you, and we're excited. Yeah.
I love that you coded your AI to have a calming voice, whereas mine is very judgmental and stern with me.
Yeah, she's got a whole bio. She's yeah, it's fun. It's cute, you know. She's got a personality, and she's very not emotional, very calming, and it's really not the nuts and bolts of the product, but AI has a lot of creative freedom when you get into the higher level stuff like voices and personality. So it's been a delight to code that part, but we really are mostly about the data for sure.
Of course, that's the fun that you have on the side when you're bored with the real stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, to me, well, both of these are fascinating, and they almost could work in conjunction with each other. I think as two very good tools that would work together. Coming from my background, I think that the trader training is extremely important, right? People emotionally trade all the time, and being able to have a service to help hone that, I think, is wildly valuable. And real-time feedback and suggestions from an aggregation of data based on how they've operated rather than someone just looking at it in the abstract and saying, I think maybe you did this one this time, but that's the only one I saw, so I can't give really great feedback. I think that's a really cool opportunity for people to take advantage of.
Yeah, and it allows them to input what their trading style is. Help them build a risk management strategy. Helps them in all those different areas, and then helps them execute appropriately according to what their plan is.
Beautiful. And then on the prismatic side of things, I've been a part of that beta, which has been really fun. Specifically, I know that she was told to treat me with a little bit more cautiously and friendly so that I'm not so scared of her. So I very much appreciate that. But
It's amazing.
But in reality, I have actually also streamed the order flow from my Galaxy S24 Ultra in the Discord, and it's worked relatively well for some people, just so that they could see what the tool is. And the fact that a tool like that's being available on mobile is awesome. So I think both of these are really cool, and I would encourage, when they're ready, people to check them out because I think both have extreme potential.
Terrified, you were able to stream that while your phone was locked, right? Isn't that what you did?
So that was my understanding. I mean,
that was
I
cool
can't see the other end of it, But
Sure. It worked well.
but it was really interesting. I just propped it up, set it up, and said, hopefully this works for you guys. And if it doesn't, and the data goes bad while you're in the middle of a trade, I'm sorry. Not my fault.
No, it
But
didn't. It worked well. Thank you.
yeah, it was cool. So I appreciate you both for that. And the funniest thing is, before I knew either of you were working on a product, I wrote a piece or a post in After Hour about qualified small business stock, which I've talked to each of you about individually, just kind of at a high level. We're not going to go in that today, but I had no idea either of you were working on anything. I just knew you guys were tech wizards, is what my layman term will be. And turns out you both were working on something, so very cool, and kind of bringing it full circle. So I'm excited to get into the nuts and bolts of it today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, excited.
Awesome. So I guess where we'll start is either of you can take this, but how is AI currently being used in the markets today from your knowledge?
That's a good one. I've got some ideas. So, like, first, the most widely used one is algorithmic trading. AI is just using algorithms to execute trades at high speeds, detecting patterns and price movements, news, market sentiment, those kind of things. That's a big one that's being used. Sentiment analysis is another big use of it. Scanning news articles, earnings calls, social media, trying to like gauge the market sentiment, and it often helps influence some of the trading decisions. There's also like quantitative strategies, AI models generating and back testing trade strategies based on the historical price action, specific indicators and fundamental data. There's like portfolio optimization, which is basically what my tool is trying to do, helping traders rebalance portfolios dynamically, maximizing returns while managing like risk exposure. And then with my background in cybersecurity, there's like fraud and anomaly detection as well, detecting unusual trading activity, and making sure that there's some protection against market manipulation. But high level, that's kind of my thought of how it's being used today. Alloy, you may have more insight on me on that one.
So yeah, I think you covered the first half of that is a lot of what I'm seeing. And like whether we're looking at job listings, I think you covered it from a high level really succinctly. So I spoke with Bloomberg the past couple of weeks, and look, they're hiring for people who are doing things like everything that was just said out loud is a big part of what they're hiring for today. And it's really at that point where if you have these huge volumes of data and you have these clients that can provide data that they've been keeping track of, especially with social media, then they can hand that over to data scientists and deep learning experts to really make something useful out of it. So I'll probably talk less about portfolio optimization, although there's a huge boon there. It's such a wide market of people who really could benefit from that. But what I've seen happen is a lot of we'll bookmark that thought and we'll talk about banks real quick, like institutional finance and treasury departments and stuff. So my hands-on experience was working at the Treasury for the Bank of America, biggest treasury in the United States, about $250 million flowing through the channels at any given second. And a big part of that was fraud detection. But more than that is sort of defining what risk is in the world that we've been in and that we're headed toward. And so they were working with C3.ai, which is a platform I use to deliver some solutions there that was designed, the model we were creating was designed to assess the probability of certain outcomes. So in something we were really interested in then was sort of the situation in Turkey, which if you don't know, we can just skip over that because it's a big, dense political topic. But We're lucky to be in America where things are relatively stable. The rest of the world does not necessarily have that luxury. And so Airbnb, so maybe not so much alpha these days, but a lot of people don't know Airbnb has more cash moving around than any other company. And you could pause there and ask that question. But rather than make it a pop quiz, I'll just tell you it's because of escrow services. It's because Airbnb is moving so much money from people renting time at different locations, and they're doing it all over the world. There's really nowhere Airbnb has not kind of dipped their hands into the pot, so to speak, at this point in the company's history. So now they're controlling some amount of escrow services in every country that they're allowed to. And so, just like a bank, they have a desire to move that around and de-risk. And if they've got a bunch of money stored in Turkey and they need to provide an escrow service, which, just to define escrow, is it's a fancy word for just holding money for a contractual obligation. And so, like, if you are renting a space and you're a customer of Airbnb, you're giving that money to Airbnb before the person who owns the property actually has that money. And then finally, when the deal goes well and you're exiting the property and you took out the trash, you followed the policy, and you didn't destroy the ceilings or the walls, then that money is given to the owner of the property. So, but in between that time, right, it's in escrow, and a lot of stuff can happen in 1 week of a stay. And as you know, you can look at headlines from the past 4 years in Turkey. Sometimes money gets frozen in accounts. So what Airbnb was really interested in using AI to do is move money around really fast. So they would take money in escrow from Turkey and move it to London, for example, and then they'd move it back to Turkey when the escrow service needed to be completed. So the whole timeline of that, the life cycle of that money was finished. But knowing where to move it and when was of interest to Airbnb. They were a big client of Bank of America. Then to go back to that bookmark, right? A lot of quantitative analysis is done with sentiment, like was just said, and social media. We've had a lot of what we call unstructured data in the biz, which is like it's not numbers yet. So how do we make it into numbers? It's really hard traditionally to quantify sentiment and what people are saying. And even today, there's a lot of noise associated with that. There's a lot of social media campaigns that start. And so there's another company that I spoke to, not Bloomberg, but they're a company called Stratascale. And they were interested in detecting grassroots movements online so they can understand when things like boycotts begin. So that's pretty provocative and something I'm kind of keeping an eye on.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting, and I thought, oh yeah, I mean, yeah, there's an explosion of growth in these areas now because we can do these things, and so they're detecting grassroots movements on social media to that's their edge with alpha. And then Bloomberg, they're so big, they're massive, of course, so they're looking to combine all of this is what they're talking about doing. So they've got all this data, they've got all these important clients that have data of their own, and they're coming to Bloomberg and saying, hey, what can you do with this? So Bloomberg is hiring deep learning experts like crazy right now to consolidate this information and keep their edge and stay king in the market maker world. So a little bit long, but really just elaborating on the high level points that were made. A lot of really exciting stuff coming, and I think it's even possible retail gets exposure to some of that. It's not going to stay at the very tippy top. Well, I think we're going to get access to some of this stuff too.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a point in the next, I'll say 5 years, where the playing field is much more level with the use of AI.
I think that's wildly interesting, right? Because for the longest time, it's been the people at the top of the food chain with the most access to data and the smartest people analyzing that data can move so much quicker than the retail trader. But AI being a playing field leveler, I think is very interesting and a good thing for retail, which is what After Hours is all about. So I'm excited to hear that. Wanted to talk about some maybe common misconceptions you've heard or realities around what AI can and cannot do right now, maybe in general, and if you have any ideas about how that could apply to the market. I think that would be great because I think a lot of people have a very small understanding of what AI in its current form, and including myself, but I've had conversations with you guys, so I feel like I know a little bit. But that is maybe what scares me too. But let's talk a little bit about what AI can and cannot do right now.
Oh,
Alloy, you want to take this one first?
yeah, I don't mind, I think. So yeah, there's this saying, we're on the knee of the curve. There's an exponential curve that we're on, and the exciting and scary and unpredictable part is that we're going to see some explosive capabilities here soon. So, but let's create some constraints around that. It's exploding in ability very quickly, and so it's a lot easier to say statements that would have been unbelievable 5 years ago, like oh, it's gonna cure cancer. If you said that 5 years ago, people probably would have been like, oh, that's crazy. But now I think more people are coming around to those things. So it's actually harder to say what it can't do right now. But a couple of things, right? Um, so far, AI is still very expensive to operate and run. And I think a lot of the industry, myself included, is interested in really cost-effective ways to design architectures that specialize in a certain domain, and maybe sacrifice some of the general abilities. So my AI is custom. It's fine tuned. So that's just a word that describes a sort of distillation. So you can think of it as like making wine from grapes, right? You don't need the whole grape. You just need certain content and to let it ferment. And that is a part of the fine tuning or the training of a base model to do a very specific task very well. And that's sort of a separation of all the contaminants, you could call it, or the noise. And we don't need it to tell you how to make a cake. What we need it to tell you is how options premiums work. So distillation of models is really key for being energy efficient and cost efficient, because these models are still very expensive to run. And so I think that's maybe sounds like unusable information to a lot of people who are listening to this. Like, how does this affect me? I pay $20 for ChatGPT every month for the pro version, and it works just fine. Or ChatGPT Plus, whatever. There's all these business models, right? But you pay a premium, and then you get access to a superior version of it, and you're like, this seems pretty cheap to me. What do you mean it's expensive to run? Well, OpenAI and companies like them are investing in the future of their own company. So they're actually operating at a minor loss right now because they know we're at the knee of that exponential curve, and they're hoping, not even hope, they're very sure, they have high conviction that it's going to be able to do more. But what they need now is to learn from how users are operating it. So here's some things to look out for as far as the market is concerned. We need energy. So yeah, nuclear stocks are doing really well because we need a sort of decentralized modular grid for energy to supply this stuff more cheaply as well. There's a lot of alpha in the statement that right now these models are very energy hungry. They're very difficult to distill, and even that process to distill them into doing one thing very well while throwing out the rest, like the grapes analogy, that in itself is energy heavy. And it costs a lot to do that. Just to get it to be more efficient, you have to spend money on distilling it. Just like grapes, you have to have barrels, you have to have pressure sensors and stuff for the wine. It's not that much of a loose analogy. It's really pretty similar. And so that kind of brings a topic like DeepSeek into play, where the headlines were saying, oh, it only costs like 6.5 million or something like that to train. I'm not going to get into that. I think there's a bit of I guess that is related to the topic, right? So DeepSeek actually did train on 50,000 NVIDIA H100s. And if you don't know, those are data center GPUs. But they can't say that out loud because there is an embargo on NVIDIA GPUs, meaning they're not supposed to have those. And so it's okay if they already do and they found them through some means, but saying it out loud is when they get in a little bit of trouble. So DeepSeek also, I'll be the first one to tell you if you haven't heard it yet, is not at that barrier of breaking the energy efficiency problem. They're still paying a lot of money to train that model. So some news to look out for if you want some alpha is any company that has successfully trained a model for lower energy costs and the same or higher performance, huge deal right now. We're all looking forward to that. And the other thing is, meanwhile, invest in some modular energy companies for sure. So that's what it can't do. We can't do any of this very affordably just yet, and that's alpha for the future. What it can do, sky. I really am one of those people that think the sky is the limit. I mentioned curing cancer. I think we have a really exciting future ahead of us because of these technologies.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'll generalize a little bit more around the market. I think AI right now is a great tool, but it's not a complete replacement for traders. Obviously, it excels in data analysis, and it can go through numbers faster than any human will ever be able to do it. But it also lacks like intuition and the adaptability in unpredictable market conditions. They're trained on very static ins and outs, inputs, outputs, and AI is only as good as the data that it's trained off of. So if you put garbage in it, you're going to get garbage out of it. And they're great at recognizing patterns. It just doesn't quite understand the market the way that an experienced trader can. Currently, I think we are in a trajectory of where that might change in the next couple of years. But I think currently, right now, we're just kind of limited in that capability. So I don't think AI is going to fully replace human traders ever. I think it's just going to be a tool that they can use more so as like a crutch, not necessarily the full jetpack that's going to send them to the moon.
Gotcha. Couple questions off of that. First, to touch on Alloy's point, what do you already got to the first point where energy is a big thing, right? Where that could maybe, I don't want to say inhibit, but for lack of a better term or knowledge on my part, maybe inhibit or slow down the growth of where AI could get. But do you think there's a compute power problem for the future too? Or do you think we're good there and it's mostly about time and training and things of that nature? And maybe none of that is even important because I don't know what I'm talking about. But
No, I think it's a really good question. It's the other half of the coin, right? It's what are we powering? So yeah, we are a species that procrastinates, and that's kind of a good thing. A rattlesnake doesn't use all of its venom unless it has a really big predator, right? So we're in a similar boat biologically where we don't want to pour all of our resources into something until there's a greater need. And here's what I'll say about that. We're very good at innovating our way out of bottlenecks. There are some computing trajectories that I think are really provocative. Like, I'm not going to name them here because we're pretty far away out. But I've got a friend of mine that works on Ionic or IonQ. IONQ is the ticker. I was speaking with him last night, and quantum computing is on the way. And what he described to me is that what they're able to do, and the case studies they have with like GE and Boeing, and like traffic management solutions, so government and private sector, is they're taking machine learning models and they're looking at the very last stage of its prediction. So there's layers to machine learning models, just like your brain, where like you have sight, you have vision, you have just raw data coming in kind of, and then you have some subconscious processes, and then there's a layer on top that sort of gives you language to communicate what you're experiencing in the world. And that last layer is metaphorically also inside of machine learning models is called the output layer. And what they're looking at doing is using quantum computing to take just that output layer. Say you've got that distilled model I was talking about that's really good at making cake recipes for you on the fly. And you did that work already to create an AI that does cake recipes. And now you're realizing last minute, this is sort of a silly example, but you're realizing last minute.
I'm laughing. Because I appreciate cake recipes rather than something that might be a little bit more intimidating.
Well, okay, so I'm so fascinated with the markets, I can't think of an example that would steer me away from that. But for the sake of argument, you've got a business, right? And this is important because we've got a lot of AI startups popping up, and they're all going to have different things. There's a lot of room for growth here because everyone wants to master a category. So let's say that there's a publicly traded company that has taken every blog with recipes in the world, and they're like, okay, we've deleted those blogs are now passe. They're outdated because we got this AI that can tell you about any recipe you need, and you just have to ask it. Okay, now they realize, people aren't interested in cakes. They're interested in pizza. Okay, now they're like, all right, we have two options. We need to either create a new model and spend all this money doing that, pay researchers who know more about pizza than they know about cake. And what if someone compete? There are some growth challenges associated with switching gears like that. Well, what IonQ, again, a publicly traded company. So here's some very legitimate alpha I got the past week from a gentleman I work with. Shout out Tim. They're looking at that last layer. So all the training you already did, it's not unlike plugging Neo in to the Matrix and teaching him Kung Fu. Just switching gears. Just saying, okay, now you know how to make cake. Now change all of your information to start making pizza without retraining the entire model. And they're looking to do that for a cheaper cost than it would be to retrain the model or to switch gears, so to speak. So that is it's a challenge associated with how we look at growth and sort of the hardware question you were talking about, right? Is whether we're talking about NVIDIA, which does have a quantum research division, so they're not going to be left behind on this. We've got some photonic computing going on, so using light instead of just electricity to move things around. And as we know from grade school, light is really fast, so there's some promise there. But in between those higher order technologies that might be coming in the next 5 to 10 years, we still have some room to improve on chips. I think we could unpack that and talk about the geopolitical stuff with Taiwan and China and the United States. But to put it briefly, as long as our leaders in every respective country do their job and keep us safe and keep conflict low, we're looking at a theoretically positive future for the chips that we're currently using for the next 5 years. And after that, we will probably be happy that we were researching things like photonics and quantum, because it will become very important after 5 years to have an off ramp from what we're currently doing into something better.
Completely agree with you there.
Beautiful. Well, I appreciate the insight there. Pivoting back on that towards the markets, right? At what point in terms of training something on the market, and either of you can address this, do you think the data going in could have biases or any other issues that would limit it from reaching its full potential? Because humans naturally have biases. So how do you think it's possible to get that out of the training? Or do you think that it'll always kind of be limited by certain biases that the training models are given?
I'll let you go.
Hard one. Well, I think that like training data biases can lead to inaccurate predictions or unfair market behaviors. So I think that it's definitely a risk. I don't know if we'll ever get to a point where we can completely train it out of AI models. I say that Alloy was correct. 5 years ago, I would have said cancer is going to be around forever. So I hesitate to say never. I don't think we're quite there yet. I think maybe 5-10 years away from being able to get there. I just don't think that our learning models are quite there yet. But the trajectory is ever growing and getting greater. So I would say we're a few years away from minimizing that more, but I think it's always going to be there.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And to break, so when you have a base model like ChatGPT, it kind of it's not gibberish, but it doesn't really know what to expect from the user, and the user thusly doesn't like what it gets back. So there's a very heavy and industrially specific task called reinforcement learning that goes on that we don't, not a lot of the public really talks about or hears about, to be fair. And it's basically a cultural sock. It's trying to make sure that the shoe really fits. So once you train a model, you have everything, probabilities of different things and relationships being learned. And then what you really need is to, there's a way to say, hey, I want a chart, and please make me a chart. And the first time it does it, it makes a scatter plot. And then the user realizes, oh, wait, I have to be more specific. I wanted a line chart, not a scatter plot or a bar chart. And so this relationship, this back and forth creates a sort of layer of knowledge about what the user really expects and what they really mean by what they're saying. So that introduces a good form of bias. So to say that it will go away completely, to bring it back home a little bit, I think, right, yes, to your point, bias in the data set is something in theory that sounds bad, and we want to avoid it. On the other hand, we have created a pretty biased world as human beings, and we want it to learn about the world we understand, because if it becomes untethered from this world too much, we won't understand it. We won't understand the language it's talking about. So when it comes to certain humanitarian or social topics, I think it's really important to remove that bias, because we know as human beings, we've crafted this world to be a little bit flawed. We're not perfect. AI is supposed to help with those things. And there's other things that's like, we need to make sure there is a bias toward humans, and maybe to some extent, lesser to, let's just be really blunt about it. You don't want AI to protect property over human life, just as an example.
Of course.
So if an automated car is driving, and there's a very expensive luxury fashion house like Versace or Louis Vuitton or something, and the car has an option to hit a human or a store, you don't want it to hit the human. You want it to decide to hit the store. It doesn't matter if it's what the numbers are associated with the store. The human life is more important, and that is bias. So we have to promote some reinforcement about certain topics that humans believe in, and in that way, no, bias won't ever go away, because it's a part of how we operate. We are biased creatures. Now, going back into the higher level of it, the reinforcement learning journey, when I say a chart, it would be perfect if it understood what I meant the first time. And the only way it's going to learn that is knowing what I mean by a chart is not a scatter plot, is not a bar chart or a pie chart. It is, because I'm talking about the market, it should assume I mean either a line series or a candlestick chart. And if it knows that about me, it's more useful because it gets the answer right the first time. But it is a bias. So these are two ways, high level and really structurally a part of our culture and our society, that we need bias. And for that reason, it won't ever go away. And perhaps it's important that we keep a close eye on what the beliefs of the engineers and the people who run these companies are, because you don't want Kanye West training a model right now, probably, because his biases and his leadership qualities would be introduced. We want people who say the right things in public, and preferably say the right things in private too, and aren't hiding anything. But there is definitely a question there about power and who's really running the show with this stuff. And we've got a big culture of corporations, and the resources to train these models is only growing. And so we have to keep an eye and put our trust in the people that we think are going to keep us safe. But I think that's a combination of government and the right kinds of corporations to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Fair point. We need to make sure that the people creating these tools are the proper people in place. It's a huge part of it.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that people can, speaking from experience, people can be scared of, right? Because
Even terrified.
yeah, even terrified of it. So I think that's a really good point that should hit home with a lot of people. I wanted to pivot to kind of the current, something that is current, and then this will maybe lead to the next segment where we'll talk about the future of how AI could impact the markets. And I think this will, both of you can take your shot at it at your own kind of respective tool that you're building. But where do you think AI could be? Well, I'll start with you, Double Down. Could be really useful in things like risk management, but where do you think that it will never fully be able to protect someone's risk, right? Where do you think it can help, and where do you think it can't help, so that people can understand what it can do for them and what they still need to make sure that they're aware of and taking action on?
Yeah, so I think AI is always going to be a little bit better at risk management than humans, mostly because it really just takes the emotions out of trading. So it's hard to say really. I always think that AI will be ahead of the game with risk management. Always will. People will always get emotional around money. It's just human nature. That's kind of a necessity in our life to be able to survive. So it's not one of those things that we can just look at it and say, oh, that's just a piece of paper. I'm gonna throw it away because I messed up drawing on it. And people do that all the time. They throw away paper. Well, they won't do that with money. And it's just paper. It's the same thing, but you put a different value to it. And that's where emotions come into play. And I think AI will just remove that. So I think I'm good at my risk management because I look at it as data. Sorry, you can hear my child. Alloy, do you mind taking over?
I have them. Well, let's do this because I am really interested from hearing from him on that point. So I have my own version of the question for you, Alloy, which I think that you're gonna love based on our conversations. But what do you think AI's current role in something like due diligence is, and where do you think that's going really in the short term?
Oh, yeah. So yeah, you're right. I'm excited to answer this. So yeah, I'm thrilled about the future in which I no longer have to read hundreds of documents. Like on one hand, I am privileged in that I've gained conviction in that research process because it's really hard to sink time into something if you don't know if it's going to be worth it to you. I think we all relate to that, whether it's a job or any deed. We want to get something out of it that's fair to us. And so, researching was sort of a faith-based process because the market, it's hard to believe you're going to see anything anyone else hasn't. And so that you have alpha, it's like, why am I so special? But over time, right, I've learned that no, reading documents from the government that might not be available everywhere or that everyone else finds too boring, that is where the alpha is. A lot of, all of my plays so far on After Hour have been successful in at least some time frame since I post them. And I do feel like I'm grateful to all the documentation I have to read. Now, that being said, it's unsustainable. You heard a kid in the background a bit ago. I've got a kid on the way, and I fully anticipate that I won't have the time to do that anymore. So I'm so happy to live in a world today where AI will start to take on that labor for me. And so one of the big things is volumes of data, like was said earlier, and the numbers, the amount of crunching that really goes on, the volume of information with relation to, because let's be honest, if AI took 2 weeks to deliver insights to you, you'd probably just pick up the task
Yeah,
yourself
useless.
again.
Useless. It's
Yeah,
too late, generally speaking.
yeah. But the fact that it's able to do it quickly and that it's able to look at all this volume of information relative to me means I can stop reading this stuff for 5 hours in an evening and I can spend time with, like, it almost makes me emotional that I get this time back that I can spend with my family. That is a huge thing. And like during beta, we've tested some of this stuff with 2.5 million documents. And if you ask about small modular reactors for the nuclear sector, it will look through everything, throw out what's not relevant, and pull back the information that is relevant. The challenge there is really related to what was said earlier, that there's always an emotional component to that, and I have to think of the right questions to ask, which is really a factor of my emotions and my interests and my tunnel visioned human view of the world is I have to kind of sometimes take a step back and think, okay, what's really possible here? Which questions should I be asking? Because remember, there's 2.5 million documents just a step or a click away. So I've still been left with the task of asking the right questions, but it can go through all those documents for me. And the fun part is, right, you read something you didn't read before, and now you've got more questions. So it keeps going, and then before you know it, in 15 minutes, you've done the due diligence that would have taken you days or maybe even weeks, and you've made a decision in maybe half an hour about what you're doing with your money. So for that process, it's brilliant. And just to tack on to piggyback from the first question, if it's okay, I really respect the angle that we are emotional creatures, and I think I agree, just to compound on that sentiment, it will always be better at risk management.
And then that the privilege there is you're really your own worst enemy. And that's a good position to be in, to not have anyone else to blame but yourself. It means you've got all the information that you need. So now you're just in your own way. And that's even maybe a fun challenge to kind of be in your own way and be like, all right, now how to step out of my own way, listen to what this thing is telling me, and see how it goes and manage my risk in this way. So yeah, I'm really excited for the future of due diligence with AI, because I am just tired of reading documents hundreds at a time.
Same here.
Well, let me jump in real quick because I saw an opportunity for two things. First, excuse me, when I did my interview with Double Down, and this is available to anyone, he gave a resource on parameters that you can give ChatGPT. And one of the things that Alloy said right there was that when you get a response from the AI, the generally the first thing is I have more questions. And one of the things that's part of that training or required response out of the chat GPT that he gave us, that's again available to everyone in that interview, is give me 3 questions based on the response that I should be asking you next. And to me, I've implemented that on some of the research I've done, and it's been wildly helpful. So I was just wanted to make sure everyone was aware of that, because that's something really easy. It takes 10 seconds, copy and paste it into chat GPT, and it'll start behaving a little bit differently. And I've loved the responses I've got. So I wanted to first thank you for that and making that available to the community.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it just reinforces what Alloy said. You just really need to train the bot what you're looking for. And once you get to that point and you have it save it in its own memory, with like your preferences and your styles and what kind of responses you want, you get so much more out of it. And then, like I said in my interview, and Alloy said many times before, have a conversation with it. Just talk to it like you would anybody else, and it will give you back more of what you want rather than trying to talk robot to a robot.
Yeah, really well put. I agree. Be a human. That's your job. That's what you're good at. You're good at being a human. Don't force it. Yeah.
Awesome. And then before we get back to the risk management, because I do want to, in my role currently, I help people manage risk for a living, whether that be market risk, which is one thing, or the risk of not. Mostly of what I do is planning risk, right? Where they haven't thought, what have they not considered? How can they do things better? So that's where my background is. But I definitely want to talk about risk a little bit more. But one question I had about DD is almost real-time DD, right? And an intriguing, really recent thing that happened with earnings for AMD specifically, right, is if you were watching it, and I got burned on it, so this makes me angry, and I know a lot of other people did, but you saw it go from 118 at close, pretty much closer to 119, all the way up to 125, and you're like, oh, this is really great, and then boom, drops down immediately, pretty much 10 minutes later, based on information in the earnings report. Do you think that was their AI had a role in that, in analyzing that, or do you think that was humans? And how do you think that might change in the future?
I think there's always a combination of the two. Whether or not it's AI just overreacting because it missignaled something, that's something that's a risk factor in using AI, and part of that lack of transparency with the black box training models. You just kind of have to adjust to it. I think AI is always going to try to predict where the market's going, and I think there's going to be a lot of issues with that as more people adopt the larger AI trading bots. I think you're going to see larger swings, because as more people adopt it, more people are utilizing the same strategies and the same signals that everybody else is. So rather than a no-name bot saying buy here and 3 people buy, now you've got larger bots that have 50,000, 100,000, a million people eventually going off of these buy signals. So you're going to have same thing, massive swings with either the bot itself buying and selling, or just people blindly following the signals. So I think it's going to continue being that way. I don't know if this last one was something, specifically around AI, but definitely something triggered it again, and there was a large drop once again.
Yeah. I'll precede this statement with another. I really didn't listen to the earnings call. I was in an AMD play, but the funny thing about earnings is you're in and then you don't have control. So you can listen to it, but it's entertainment at that point because you're out of control. Whatever happens, happens. So I didn't
Well, to
listen
give
to
a
the
little bit
call.
of context, just so you know, all the movement happened prior to the call. They released the report, and then the call was an hour later. So it was really
Okay.
interesting to see how the movement went up, and then somehow the market figured out that they actually, even though earnings were amazing, they missed on data centers.
Okay. Yeah.
Big
And
time.
so I knew the data center was a miss. And that's interesting. Okay, thank you. That gives a lot of context. So as a quantitative analyst, right, what I can take from that is um there was a lot of froth building up in the low volume hours, or you could say low volume minutes, really, and that caused a lot of premium to be accumulated because people were buying at higher and higher prices in order to get exposed to AMD prior to what they thought were probably going to be good results. Some technicals that validate that statement are we're at a 3-year low for AMD, meaning if you look at the volume weighted average price, so we're in a nutshell, we're at a very low point for AMD. So there was a lot of technical. If you're a technical trader, you like drawing lines. Shout out. I was kind of in the same boat, and I believed that because we were so low on AMD and to the boon of AI, that there were at least 3 factors that could cause it to go up. Both the technical, the era that we're in, and we've been trending lower on AMD for a whole year. So if not now, then when? And then all I needed to work for me were the fundamentals or that phone call. But of course, I was out of control of that, and I just had to kind of see what happened. So what that tells me is during a low volume period in the market, i.e., in between the minutes of 4:01 and 4:30 ish, that's the way I like to put it is if you're trying to sell a TV and you imagine you're in a white room, a very large room, and it's got a lot of empty space because there's only 2 people in it. And you ask them, hey, what do you think this TV is worth? One of them will say $90, just as a hypothetical. One of them says $90, and the other says $200. That's not a lot of liquidity. That's not a lot of what's the term? I should know this, but it's not a lot of moneyness. You can't. It's not very liquid to sell that TV in that group of 2 people because you've got to kind of find an average that neither of them is going to like. I mean, the person who gives you the $200 number is going to like it if you say 150, but the person who says 95 or something is not going to like the 150 price. So that forces you to sell at a loss. That is really the nature of volatility right there. You get a wide bid and ask, and you don't have a lot of price agreement, and that usually is because of low volume. Now, take that same room that you had 2 people in and put 1,000 people in there. You have a bigger market, you have more volume. You can say, what do you think this TV is worth? And yes, you'll have to kind of like deal with all the shouting because you're in a room of 1,000 people now. But that's the idea, is it's an auction, right? And so when you have low volume after hours and it climbs like that, it's due to froth and anticipation. And probably contributing to that was everything I just said. It's that we were at a 3-year low. We had some technical reason to believe it would go up, and it's the era of companies like semiconductors. So that there was froth is to be expected. Now, the thing that ruined that is just what you said, Terrified. It's the fact that data center was a miss. Big deal, really disappointing, and actually drove AMD below its 3-year support level. So something to think about for anyone listening is maybe this is a discount. That's a really tricky spot. Just thinking of it, I have so many strong opinions about AMD, and I'm trying to.
Same.
Yeah,
I have strong opinions of it too. So I don't want to make this an AMD podcast. But I thought it was interesting from a due diligence standpoint because it almost seemed like real time if you were reading the report, right? All the numbers are really good. Like in my mind, if AI had any part of it, it's like spinning. I'm watching in my head ChatGPT spit out a summary of the earnings report. All the earnings numbers are good, 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 good. Oh, data centers missed off a cliff. Like to me, that seemed wildly logical, even if that's not how it happened. So I thought it was
Well, no,
interesting. Go ahead.
well, let's break that down more. Yeah, I'll delineate that a little bit because I think I can here. Right. So when we're talking about AI, what Double Down said is absolutely correct. That it really excels in places where the numbers are either too numerous, too voluminous to really deal with for a human brain, at least in the time frame that matters. If you have all the time in the world, you can write Shakespeare from scratch or something like that using random letters. But if you have one lifetime, you've got certain priorities. So, AI really in the market comes into play when something is happening too fast for a human to manage, and that's when you can with pretty high conviction say that AI is involved. So, here's an example with the earnings, right? And this happens during FOMC. So when Jerome Powell was speaking during the Federal Open Market Committee, I can say confidently what I'm about to say is occurring, and this is not a tinfoil hat kind of thing. This is real. NVIDIA has a great SDK, software development kit, that is called Riva, RIVA, and it's very good at transcribing speech into text in real time from any accent, any culture. It can get the words right. Really cool. And if you need this technology, I highly recommend going with the NVIDIA SDK if you're a coder. What could have been happening, right? Because the prices were launching so high due to the froth and demand and the technical analysis that people were doing, that the only thing really that was going to benefit from that price movement was something quick enough to analyze the words being said on the call in time to sell right when certain words were being said. So, like I said, this happens with the Federal Open Market Committee meetings every quarter. It happens certainly during earnings calls. There's no reason to think it wouldn't. And if I was working at Bloomberg, I would probably be looking for my clients at certain statements that I needed forward projections on. I would do market analysis on the data center angle and be like, okay, look, AMD is great, but gaming, sorry to the gamers, but gaming doesn't matter. It's not a big revenue driver. AI, the alpha is baked in. Everybody knows everything about AI, and it's the future. So all we really care about is if they're competing in data center departments. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my AI transcribe and look for the data center parts of the statements. And if I hear anything negative, sell immediately. That is very likely that happened. So that hopefully is more of an answer.
Well, I appreciate it. I think it just gives context to how, bringing it back, how AI could do DD at a real time level, which no human could really keep up with that. So it sounds like it's certainly possible right now for it to impact due diligence, and I think that only gets better in the future, which I do want to talk a little bit more about, and I'm looking at how long we've been on this episode so far, so I do want to move on. And this is a more general question, and either of you can take this. So we've hinted at it a little bit, that the next 5 to 10 years is important, but we haven't quite gotten a little bit more specific. And I know a lot of people in tech are like, I don't really know what the next 5 years looks like. But if you had to, gun to your head, right, say, this is where I think AI is headed in the next 5 to 10 years. What do you think that looks like? Just generally speaking.
Okay, I'll keep it general, then Alloy can break it down more. So I think AI will integrate deeper with quantum computing. I think that's the first, most obvious way it's going to go. It's going to make real-time market predictions more accurate. Like he said, there's going to be like Riva and so many other speech analysis tools will be looped into how we do DD, how we look at predictions of stock prices. I think self-learning models are going to adapt dynamically now without like human intervention eventually. And we're going to have more AI-powered, like personalized trading assistance for the retail traders. So I think the generalized AI tools are going to kind of fall to the wayside, and everybody's going to expect it to be kind of tailor-made to the individual. And I think that's going to be a large area of improvement for where current tools are. But on the other side, I also think that regulations are going to really tighten. And so I think as AI takes a larger role in market decision making, I think the larger institutions are going to take note of that and try to kind of do what Intuit did with taxes and make it so complex that you're either already in or it's impossible for you to get into the market and build something different.
I'll jump in real quick. I fucking hate how complicated taxes are. I know you and I have
Oh
had
yeah.
this conversation. I specifically made my Twitter or X that I have for Terrified of AI kind of account hunt one post and one post only about the number of words in the tax code. I hate taxes, and
Oh yeah.
no average individual could ever hope to understand the tax code. I learned something new the other day, and this is what I do for not taxes, but in personal finance for a living. There's way too much, and they need to figure that out and make it more accessible and easy for the layman to understand rather than being forced to go to someone and trust them without being able to verify. There's no option to trust but verify. It's just trust.
Yeah, my family is full of lawyers and they're all wordsmiths. So they'll take, a simple ask and make it a 30-page document where every word matters. So it's kind of funny to see how that plays out in different markets.
Yeah, I digress about taxes. It gets me worked up. So I'll leave it at that. Um, but yeah, I think that's a good example of how larger entities might try to influence where the regulation and complexity of law around that goes. So if you wanted to add anything to that, Alloy, I think it'd be insightful.
Yeah, I got imaginative about the tax thing. Do you mind restating the question a little bit? Yeah, I got distracted a little bit, to be honest. So where are we at?
We were
Uh,
talking about the where we think AI will be going in the next 5 to 10 years, kind of generally. We kept it market oriented, but if you want to expand beyond the market, and then we can bring it back there, however you want to address it, or if you want to talk about the tax thing, I'm always happy to talk about taxes. So
one of
Yeah.
30 people.
So I agree with what Double Down said. I think yeah, quantum will play a role in 5 years. We've touched up on this a couple of times. You've asked really smart questions that have led us into this category, and we've got some growth hurdles to overcome, but I think we'll be fine. And so really for the market, we have a lot of opportunity to see a lot of smaller companies master certain categories. No one wants to do everything. And so you've got companies like, oh, what is it now? I don't want to mention any by name specifically as recommendations per se, but we've got some companies that are doing just voice transcription for fast food restaurants. We've got companies that are doing just robotics, which is multimodal or multi-sensor learning. So taking feedback from, synthetic hands or, cameras and combining that information to make a robot. Everyone has a category that they belong to. And so for the next 5 years, we're going to see a lot of growth emerging in practical use cases. Let's take a step back a little bit, because I was reading a document that helps me categorize this in the next year, and then I'll say the next 5 years. So I was reading something that said, and as a part of this industry, I completely agreed with it. So maybe I'm biased, but the past year we've been spending a lot on R&D, research and development, to find out what AI can do and what it can't do. Because of course, if you've ever had a manager or a director and you're a technical person, you know that everything takes a lot of convincing before you get a budget approved. And so we've had a big push into AI, and the budgets were approved for that merit alone. And then they're like, okay, now see how you can improve the customer experience with these models. If you can't make customer service agents or you can't make our customer support better, then we don't care. And the good news is it works, and it does make those experiences better. So now this next year, like I'm talking 365 days, we're going to see these things start to go into production.
All these ideas that were just ideas the past year are becoming reality in the next year. So you want to look at companies that benefit. They have a large customer base. Maybe they've got some bad reviews because the company has not been hiring customer service agents, or maybe they are independent of the business operations, like in another country, or they're not trained very well here in the United States or anything like that. AI is going to pick up that slack. There's alpha there. So we're applying these models now to actually get results after spending a year or two even doing a lot of heavy research and development. It's becoming real. That's what to look forward to in the next year. Next 5 years, we're looking at the scaling becoming more of a role in the markets and in these companies. So if you're investing in a company that does just voice transcription very well, and you hear someone say, it's like, hey, why would I invest in that when like NVIDIA does it all? Your answer to that should be because we're headed toward a world where expertise and perfecting a solution really matters more. Now you're looking at a 2 to 3, 5 year time scale for that, but that's the time to buy. So that's what we're looking forward to in the next half decade or so is yes, we're building these solutions out for pretty basic needs that we haven't really been met by demographics and markets just yet. So like I mentioned, customer service a little bit. And then at the drive-through, I think you should be fully prepared to be talking to a robot at the drive-through. And I think that you should be fully prepared for having your food delivered to you by a drone or an autonomous vehicle. And think about which companies might be supporting that reality and invest in them if you believe in it.
How about the next 5 years? Was
Yeah.
that part of that?
Yeah, so that's like, I know it's hard to believe, right? But that the next 5 years is specific technologies. So like the drive-through thing, that's an example
Gotcha.
of what.
See.
Yeah, those companies that really are narrowing in on one use case, they're not revealing themselves to be proprietors or experts in that use case today. You have to believe in that. You have to project that future out in your imagination and see, okay, where do I see this going? Which I'm trying to speak a little bit diplomatically here. I don't want to talk about replacing jobs. I think that we've got, imagine a drive-through situation. You've got someone who's flipping burgers because someone got sick, and so now they're doing two jobs because they're also answering calls at the drive-through. Wouldn't it be very helpful to that individual if their coworker is sick if the robot was doing the drive-through transcription and they're only making the food, and the food's better because they're focused on one task at a time. The transcriptions are more accurate because they're not dealing with all the noise going on outside and the quality of the microphone on the drive-through screen. And there is a specific company I'm thinking of. I just don't want to make any specific recommendation. Okay, I'll say it, and I'll again, more
All
diplomacy
right, hold
speak
on.
here.
Let's pause real quick. No companies here should be considered financial advice. Investing involves risk, and past performance is not indicative of future performance. All right, we have our bases covered.
Here we go.
You can tell I've
Love
said
you,
that a lot.
Thank you so much. That's what I was looking for.
So good.
SoundHound is a company that happens to be focusing in on this area. And if you look at their stock price, they're very low because it's not all the way factored in yet. Can they be $100 a share company? I don't know. Okay. So that would take a lot of growth. It would take a lot of partnerships with companies that demand that service. But does McDonald's want to do that? No. They make burgers. They manage the supply chain and they manage many employees. So they're not going to head straight forward to the AI direction. Okay. They need someone to step in and do that transcription for them. And all that SoundHound needs to do is do what I've been talking about, which is demonstrate that it works, that it's not just research and development, that this is the next stage, and explain to McDonald's or Burger King or whoever why this is going to make their business better. And then, like I was talking about delivery robots, right? If you look at the next stage of that, this is a tricky topic because no one wants to hear that they might be out of a job, but hopefully no one's aspiring to create a career as a McDonald's drive-through employee. So I think I'm safe here. There is then a world in the next 5 years. Maybe SoundHound gets to, I'm just making this number up, but maybe SoundHound gets the $30, $50, $100 stock because they really did good job on the voice transcription part of this business. And now everyone realizes they've got to get in because it's important to their business. Then the next stage is the robotics. Now we've got the voice transcription. Now we need to free people up from this labor where they're working around hot grease griddles. They're frying fries, and it's not a great job. And this frees more people up to start going to college or something like that, and we can replace them with robots. And then there's maybe a couple companies that are working on that, but it's 5 years out, so I don't have those names off the top of my head just yet. But the next 5 years, we're looking at more expert systems, more systems that are not so much oriented around chatting about general subjects, but that have mastered one or two things very brilliantly. And then that's really what we need to move on beyond that, because nothing is perfect right now. And so we really need to see individual companies master these individual tasks. And that is the future of AI for the next 5 years, is distilling these things into perfected task management.
Yeah, I will say I've also, with my cybersecurity company, I've seen a huge shift into cybersecurity around OT devices. So not IT devices, not your laptops, computers, servers, but OT devices, which is robotics and automation tools and things like that. So that's definitely where it's going. And, large companies are ensuring that their OT devices and their robotics are secure now. So that's a huge shift right now that my company has had to make an adjustment to.
I am certainly going to ask you a little bit more about that as we get into the next section, right? Which has to do with risks, but we'll get there in a second. Specifically, how do you think that in the future, right? And this could maybe be happening real time, but I think will come in the next 5 to 10 years, even more so. Specifically talking about markets, how do you think that the efficiency and the speed of AI will either improve or increase volatility, liquidity, and efficiency in the markets?
Yeah, so I think AI will actually improve liquidity because it'll make the market more efficient. Market making will improve the liquidity. I think the increased efficiency could tighten bid-ask spreads, so there'll be a little bit more there. And I also think that like AI-driven like herding behavior will also increase the volatility, as I mentioned earlier. Algorithms may react similarly to the market conditions, and if enough bots are running off the same algorithms, they're all going to buy or sell at the same time.
Yeah, just to interject real quick, we did see that happen before.
Yeah.
That has happened. I forget the date. I think it was December 20 something, 2016.
Yeah, I can't remember. I
can't
do know
remember
this
the
happened
exact date,
before,
but it was like the and Fullport talked about it on his interview. He said that was one of the things that inspired him to get more into trading, to understand how it works. But there has been a time where algorithms totally dump the market. They all behave the same way. So that's not a new thing.
No, not at all.
So we'll get into maybe some of that and risks and challenges. But I agree. I think there could be a total herd. I don't know if mentality is the right word.
I call it herding behavior, but
there
same
we go.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah, so a little bit more volatility, better liquidity, and what do you think about market efficiency? Better efficiency?
Oh yeah, I think because everybody's going to be kind of on the same playing field, that there won't be these massive, like, if you look at the spreads, you see people trying to front run, like, I think it's going to drop another 50 cents, so I'm just going to put a limit order here. And I don't think it's going to be that way in the future. I think it's going to be, okay, the bot sees this, it's telling me to buy, I'm just going to go ahead and buy. And I think that's good because it'll increase the efficiency, like I said, but I think it's also concerning because there's going to be a lot more retail traders not understanding why they're making the trades that they're making. So I think it's going to increase efficiency, but I also think that there's some risk to that, but we'll get into that later.
Gotcha. And before Alloy jumps in, if he has anything to add, specifically around that, do you think it trickles down to all market caps, or do you think there will still be larger spreads the smaller you go down in market cap?
I think eventually all market caps are going to be in the
Couple
scope
pennies.
of AI. Yeah. So I don't think anybody's going to be safe in the future. I think it's going to be all encompassing. Like Alloy said, right now it's expensive as shit to focus on everything. But if eventually we will get there, and I think everything will be in the scope, small, medium, massive caps, whatever. I think it'll all be there.
Awesome.
Yeah, I agree with just about everything. I don't know how much I have to add. I think there's some quantitative parts of that are really important to focus on that Double Down mentioned, which is like the bid-ask spread closing up a little bit. More efficiency is really at the core of that, but breaking that down for new traders, it's like that means more price agreement because technically more volume as AI does its job. I think that there's actually a really fascinating opportunity in delineating the human world versus the AI trading, right? Because AI has to, of course, react to humans so long as we've still got presidents and politicians and CEOs. So, really sudden sell-offs are volatility. You might find yourself in a market where adapting to a long volatility strategy is handy because yes, the bid and ask will close up when things are more certain and rather unconditional, meaning efficient and everything, all the information is known and collaboratively agreed upon. And then, unless you think AI is going to replace Jerome Powell or whoever the Fed chair is going to be, there will be these moments where AI will sell off. It'll create the opposite effect that Double Down was talking about, which is that sudden sell-offs, very rapid, too fast for a human to really keep up with. But you can position yourself accordingly before these events. That is a great future for a volatility trader because if you've got a theory or a thesis, you can plan accordingly. Now, there are some caveats there, and it's back to the square one. It's like if we're dropping, there will be a point at which AI has decided what the fair value of something will be. So everything will be so heavily quantified potentially. I'm kind of theorizing here, but I can see a world in which AI has collaborated unintentionally to agree upon a sell-off and then has equally so collaborated on when to start buying. So volatility is
I like
fun.
that.
Yeah, I can see both sides where, okay, let's just create a hypothetical where the bid, because the AI is involved in liquidity, I agree with everything Double Down set up for this question, where the bid and ask are closing up, the liquidity is larger as sort of a cat and mouse aspect of that, and then something in the human world happens. Okay, so Jerome Powell says some words that are transcribed, and maybe it'll be Jerome, maybe it'll be someone else. So the FOMC
Wordsmith.
says something that'll be, yeah. Yeah, it'll be a new appointed member, and he or she says something that isn't agreeable to the markets, and then we sell off. Just as quickly as we sell off, AI catches the knife potentially in the future. And so, what I would say to people who are learning to trade on volatility, and that is my bread and butter, so I'm biased, but I've been doing okay because surprise, surprise, we're in a really volatile market right now. Great time to be a volatility trader. I can see a world where it's a little bit challenging for me because I have to sell at a profit kind of right when I realize it because I'm not an AI obviously, and so I'm kind of left out of when the fair price gets picked back up. So let's just say that in the future SPY is at 650 and then there's an FOMC meeting and AI sells off. Maybe it has a collaboratively agreed upon price sort of telekinetically across all the algorithms, if you will, and we drop 10 points precisely. So 650 to 640. That's hard for me to know as a trader, maybe impossible for me to know. So my profit taking abilities really need to be pretty sharp. I need to not get greedy. I need to sell when I'm up on my puts and sell on my calls when I realize it was the wrong play. So in that world, right, FOMC is coming up.
Jerome or whoever says something that's not agreeable to the markets, and of course then the AI. And so right when we start to drop, I sell my calls at a minor loss. My puts gain tremendous value. Maybe I'm up 5,000% on them, which is not unheard of. And then I have to sell them right after I sell my puts at my calls at a minor loss, because I don't know when the AI is going to pick that position back up and it becomes bullish again. Because frankly, humans will have a little bit less control. That's an interesting future to me, and it's a great time to both sharpen up your skills and maybe get yourself hands-on with AI, because maybe it's a future in which someone else's AI product will be quicker than you are, and you'll want to be a part of that as a customer, for sure, a consumer of that technology.
Yeah, and then in 10 years, when it's all sentient and they work together and they manipulate the market themselves, yeah, terrified of AI will be a
I'll be on a farm.
movement.
I'll be on a farm in Montana with my wife and kids, and
With bots farming it for you. Yeah.
No. Let's go down that path a little bit more, because I think it's really, really interesting and something that traders need to be aware of. So that's a really interesting idea that AI telekinetically across all the algorithms have this fair price in mind almost instantaneously. Do you think that leads the market down a path where you need to be a beta driven investor because it's impossible to keep up with the AI? Or do you think traders will always be able to maintain some sort of edge that a beta driven market above a beta driven market?
No, that's a good question. I think traders will have to kind
Real
of
quick,
adapt.
before we go into it, beta driven market just means that you roll with the market. You don't seek to find that word that Alloy's been saying often, which is alpha. You just ride the market all the way through, and take whatever returns it gives you. And historically, those have been pretty good. So that, just to give context to what I mean by beta driven market.
Yeah, kind of like a momentum trading strategy.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think I think that we're going to have to start developing like hybrid strategies that blend AI analysis with the human intuition. I don't think. I think that we'll need to like focus on like discretionary trading skills that the AI struggle with, and I think that's where the retail and the non-AI trader kind of has that edge. They can understand macroeconomic shifts and geopolitical risks a little bit better than AI can right now, until we get more of a standard like human model of AI. But there's some other areas where AI struggles, like market psychology, narrative-driven trades, creative strategy development. There's a lot of different areas that AI just doesn't know yet because it hasn't been trained. There will be a time where it can train itself and develop these new strategies by itself. I don't think we're there yet. So in the meantime, I think there's going to be this weird hybrid strategy where AI will tell us what we need to do, but right now I don't think there's not really a good way where AI can tell you to make a trade, tell you why the trade is a good trade, and you can enter it at the right time. You can't read its conviction in a trade fast enough to make that trade now viable. So there has to be some middle ground now. My thoughts, at least. Alloy is going to school me here shortly.
No, I agree. You sparked some interesting ideas for me. Like, I think kind of tangling the last question into this one a little bit is like, when talking about efficiency and momentum, look, we're in an imperfect world, and that's a part of why we benefit from it. There's inefficiencies everywhere, and that's a product, or that's a factor of growth. And the product is better technology, better everything. But for now, it would be foolish to, I think, assume that AI is going to perfect everything, right? It's going to make mistakes. I think you, Terrified, you
called out the alpha statement. I think alpha will be derived out of disagreeing with AI in the future. So having a good bead on what AI is doing with relation to the market will be a huge factor of alpha in the future, because that's really what you're up against. And so having a relationship with how AI works, and I think that really validates this conversation and your series in general, that you're that all these interviews that you're doing and these discussions, and your username is that there will be times that AI is wrong, and that will give value to the alpha. That will create information that you can use. And the market efficiencies, something that gets discussed a lot, to put a bookmark on that thought, is the thought experiment. If the market was completely efficient and everyone knew all the same things, the lines would be flat, because there would be no up or down. We would all agree on the price, and it would kind of imply that nothing is changing too. But the reality is things are always changing. People are always making mistakes. No one is selling when someone else is buying, and the buyer or the seller, someone is incorrect about what they're doing. They might be managing risk, so they have to. So we're leaving that out. Let's just talk about sentiment for a moment. Someone is wrong in that equation, the buyer or the seller. We don't know who until the future comes, but that is the description of market inefficiencies. And that we love that. We need the market to be inefficient so that there is alpha. In the future, AI is going to capitulate on certain things, and eventually it's going to be wrong. So there's going to be huge plays to be had if you have a relationship with that. And that kind of assumes that AI plays a really big role in the market, for sure. But let's take that for granted and assume that AI does play a really large role in the market, and that it represents more than humans do in the liquidity. So taking that hypothetical, that seems maybe likely in the future, but
I
it's
would
a hypothetical
agree
for
with
today.
that statement. In the future,
Yeah,
at
it's
least.
in the future. Yeah, AI will probably be in charge of the bull-bear dynamics, and eventually, it's going to be wrong. It's not perfect.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want efficient market. So you better, if you're listening to this right now, you better not be telling me in your head that, oh, AI will be perfect. Because if it is perfect, then we're not going anywhere. The market won't move because it'll be completely efficient. But if we assume it gets pretty efficient, and that sometimes it's wrong, and that you disagree at the right time, congratulations. You might have just found yourself some alpha.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a really exciting possibility, and I think it's a really good time to build a relationship with the whole topic of AI. Again, going back to the reason you're doing this at Terrified, I really appreciate these, because I personally am invested in people getting more of an educated opinion formed about this. And if you work with ChatGPT or you talk to it, keep doing that. Find out what it's weak at and what it's bad at, because these are the algorithms or similar algorithms that are being used to trade markets. And you will have alpha if you disagree with AI and you're right. Now, finding that opinion, that process takes conviction. But that's where we're at today. If everyone's saying Palantir is overvalued, just as an example, and you say, nope, I think it could go up more, that's a difficult position to be in, because everyone's telling you one thing and you're disagreeing with the crowd. That's what being an investor is all about. And we're just headed toward a world where you'll be disagreeing with AI. Is that much of a shift? In one way, yes, because you have to learn about AI and how to disagree with it with conviction versus a human. It's disagreeing with each other is part of life. Disagreeing with AI is going to take a little bit of a cultural and philosophical shift, I think. And part of that process is going to be learning how AI works, what it's not good at, what it is good at. And Double Down has said a couple of key things here that if you rewind in this, you can hear him talk about what it's not so good at. And that is your alpha going into the future.
Yeah, jump on that fun little thing you can do. Pin two AI tools against each other. Use Claude to develop a code. Ask ChatGPT to figure out what's wrong with it, or ask it what it's doing. See if Claude's hallucinating. For those who don't know, hallucinating, sometimes AI will say it's developing this code for an AI trading tool, when in reality it's just calling in API but not actually spitting anything out. It creates this jumbled crap code. But post two AI tools against each other. See what it comes out with. Ask it if one strategy built by ChatGPT is efficient or where the inefficiencies are from another tool. Pin them against each other, and then you'll find where that middle ground is and where probably your strategy should be.
Completely agree. Yeah, average it out.
Well, let me tell you, you inspired me to try to automate some stuff using ChatGPT, and then you made that recommendation to me literally 2 days ago. And Claude went ahead and broke the code ChatGPT did, and now I need to start over because
You're
it,
welcome.
it's very interesting. So I've enjoyed. Part of me's enjoyed it. The other part of me was like, oh, I got to start over.
Very frustrated
But
trying to learn new code. Yeah.
well, I don't even know anything about coding, so it's even harder for me. But I do want to try to take more advantage of this stuff. So, like Alloy said, really, for me, it boils down to being able to spend more time with my family and not need to worry about money. So, if I can find ways that AI can help me do that in the short term, I'm gonna go down that path, and I think everyone should. Um,
Yeah.
but that's a whole different subject. But I do think that pitting them against each other shows flaws in them. Just to throw out my own experience, right? I'm heavily dyslexic, so I have ChatGPT check all my writing for things that I'm not picking up. The amount of times I've had to correct ChatGPT on taxes is crazy. So it's not
Mhm.
always right, and I think there is going to be a world, maybe, at least in the near future. I don't know if it gets more efficient and more accurate. I'm sure it will in the future, but people are just going to trust these AIs um, without second guessing it, and there won't be a verify. Um, and I think that that's going to be a place people can get alpha as well, where they, like you said, they make their mistakes. They don't really know, and there's herd mentality along with potentially being wrong. So all great insights. Um, what do you guys think that? I know we talked on this a little bit, so if we've exhausted the topic, we can move on. Um, what do you think traders need to do and know to kind of stay ahead of the curve on this, or can we point them in an even more directed approach? I know we said understand AI more, but maybe point them a little bit more specifically in how they can do that.
I would say first, it's important to know the basics of AI. Ask AI. There's what is the 80-20 rule? It's called Pareto principle, something like that. The 20-80 rule. Basically, you ask it to tell you 20% of the information to learn 80% of the material. Ask it to do that. It'll spit out some awesome stuff. It'll tell you kind of the three levels of AI, or like AI is the more broad field. Machine learning, there is a subset, and then it goes down into deep learning. Ask it. Just if you don't know, ask it a question. For your example, if you're unsure of why the code is broken, ask it. If it's giving you an error, just paste the error in there. It'll tell you what's wrong with it. But just have the conversation. Just say you don't understand it. Say you need more about XYZ, or you heard through the grapevine that somebody said this. Just ask AI about AI. It'll tell you. It has to.
Yeah, to bounce off of that a little bit, AI, the holy grail was language for a really long time. Like doing regression, fitting lines to curves has been the thing we were doing for a really long time, and it was really all for eventually getting to modeling language. And I think one of the best favors you can do for yourself, and I know this is not going to be sexy or attractive, but get good at communicating your thoughts very well. I'll give an example of that. Look, sometimes I have a perceived deadline where I would really like to get something done within the next 30 minutes. And I have a little bit of a time crunch that I've imposed upon myself. And so I get kind of frugal with my words with ChatGPT or Claude or any of these models, and I've got some work to do. And I'm like, do this. And I shorten my words. I don't give a good description of the task I'm trying to solve, or the definition of the problem. And it gives me some garbage because it's my fault. I didn't describe the problem very well.
And then other days I've got good sleep. I don't have these perceived time constraints. Like I maybe got a week until something is due. And that feeling gives me the freedom and the cognitive energy to really explain what I need from it. And so my prompt, if you will, is a lot more precise and it's a lot better phrased. And I find that the problem is me a lot of the times. And the difference is how much energy I'm putting toward my communication abilities. Like, am I describing the problem really well? Am I, cutting corners here with what I'm trying to? It's like you take it for granted. You're like, oh, it'll just do it for me on the first try if I just kind of half-ass it. But the reality is, there's so many ways to solve a problem, and the better you are at describing the problem you're trying to solve, the better your results will be. And what's funny is looking back, man, if I had just described my problem perfectly every time, and I didn't have that emotional energy, conscious moment where I'm like, oh, I just needed to fix this problem. I just need to type this one sentence, and then I just needed to get it right. Kind of a hopium, if you will. If I had just took the time to explain my problem really well, then it would have gotten it right the first time, probably every time. And is that realistic? No, of course not. Like sometimes I'm about to walk out the door and I need to come back home and I need to see that it fixed the problem. So don't worry about it too much if you have those days. But in general, what I would try to do is 2 steps. 1 step, try to get it as exposed to AI as you're comfortable being, because it's definitely the future. I said this 3 years ago to people. I'm saying it now. If it's, to terrified, to you too, if you're a little bit frightened by it or you're apprehensive, dip your toes into the cold water as much as you're willing, because the sooner the better. So get your exposure. And the second thing is, remember that you define the problem, and the better you're able to define it, the better your linguistic and verbal skills are, the better the outcome will be, because it doesn't know what you need until you tell it. And the better you can describe your problem, I can guarantee you from experience, the better the results will be. And like, again, just a bit of retrospect. If I had just done that every time, I would have solved every problem sooner, instead of saying, no, you did it wrong, or this isn't what I wanted, blah, blah, blah. It's my problem. I have to describe the problem really efficiently. And when I do that, it typically works out really well the first time.
I've got a pro tip for that last one. If you write up what you're looking for, and then at the very, very end, say, before you create this response, what other information would be helpful? Before it responds, it will then come back with usually like 5 to 10 like questions about like, what kind of tone and style do you want? Who's the audience? What is the length and depth of it? For like a lot of the posts that I create, it asks me like, what is the audience trading level experience, trading experience level, so that it makes sure that everything that I put into after hours, I run through ChatGPT to make sure A, I'm not lying, B, the information is correct, and then I have it also do all the formatting for me because I'm lazy. But if you ask, something like that, like before you create the response, what other information would be helpful, it will help you in creating a better prompt to then get you the response that you want. So just to kind of help with the little beginner tip there.
Yeah. The hard part is sometimes thinking of the right questions to ask. So export that work to ChatGPT or whatever else too. Yeah, why not? I like that.
Awesome. All right, I do want to move along to maybe some of the risks, challenges, and market adaptations, and I think this will be a shorter part of the segment. But what kind of risks do you potentially foresee with AI in the markets, whether that be around market manipulation? We talked about biases, so we don't need to talk about that as much, but you did mention black box trading models. Maybe you can elaborate on that a little bit more. But what risks do you see with AI having increased involvement in the market?
Yeah. We talked about AI, market manipulation, bias, black box trading. I kind of touched on it a little bit. Mostly it's around just there's a huge lack of transparency in the AI decisions, and that can lead to, larger issues like regulatory or trust issues. If the AI doesn't understand, some of the rules around trading, you might be in trouble quick. Funny little snafu that I ran into is when I started developing my bot, I wanted to see if I could create a signal bot. And more on that, I wanted to see if I could link it to my portfolio and have it just do all the trading for me. It was successful, but I got 7 violations within the first day, and I had to shut it down. So much so that I got a warning email from my broker, Fidelity, telling me to stop that, or they would just shut down my account. So, there's a risk there as well that you don't understand what it's doing, and it doesn't also understand some of the regulations that are in place from just a legal standpoint. So there's an issue there. There's also a risk with use of AI and due diligence. I leverage it heavily, but there's risks around that. AI models may miss some qualitative factors like corporate culture or geopolitical risks or insider sentiment and insider trading, things like that. So like an over reliance on AI generated analyst ratings can lead to a lot of blind spots that you just don't see. And there's a lot of fake news detection that that's AI generated. So there's still some limitations around like misinformation, which makes it a little bit more of a challenge. Kind of touched on like regulatory considerations. You got to make sure that they're coded correctly. They understand what kind of account you have. Do you have a cash account? Do you have a market account? How much money is in there? Or do you have 25,000 in there? Can you do unlimited day trades? Things like that. And then there's still like you just gonna have to adapt to it. Like I always say, use it for like research and some automation, but there needs to be right now at least that level of human verification. So there's still going to be that risk there, but high level, that's kind of where I see a lot of the risk.
Yeah, I I think I agree with everything you said, Double Down. I think that we should be doing things we like doing. If you don't like trading in markets and you want AI to do it for you, that's just fine. But it means you're subsidizing your risk tolerance, you're subsidizing your decision making, you're subsidizing your money to an anonymous entity, basically a decentralized anonymous entity. Now consider this, right, for an allegory. Look, if you have a nice car, you probably like driving it. On a winter day when there's a lot of rain and it's frustrating or there's a lot of traffic, a great time for your car to drive itself, right? Because that's not fun. But on a beautiful day with the temperature 72 and the tires are sticking to the road, you want to drive it. You want to be in control because it's fun. It's enjoyable and you control the risk and you trust yourself to take that risk and drive a little faster because you have a more opinionated stance on the circumstances related to the road condition, whatever. You like your car. You are the human in control. So what I would say is if you are letting AI drive all of your decision making in the market, my question is, why are you in the market? Is it just to make money?
Mm-hmm.
That's just fine. And I relate to that, frankly, because I want eventually, when I'm 60 years old, I want to have dividend stocks and I want to be making $10,000 to $20,000 a month. Just maybe that's cutting it a little short or maybe too low of a bar, but that's just what I'm thinking today. I would like to be making that money pretty passively, but today I have a lot of fun investing in markets and finding alpha and learning. If you're not willing to take on that risk yourself and you're willing to export or subsidize that risk to an AI, your risk is defined by the fact that this other thing is doing all the work for you, and you have to be okay with whatever happens. And that is really a high level view of what Double Down was saying pragmatically. What he said was way more at the core of the issue here, which is like you have some violations on some conditions you set where it's acting out of accordance with some preferences you have, maybe, or maybe quantitatively it's just losing money.
you have to decide what you're okay with there. And if you're not okay with it, then just accept that you're the kind of individual who prefers a little bit more control and a little bit more involvement in those kinds of decisions. And that's okay. It doesn't mean you failed. It doesn't mean your AI failed. It just means that you're not comfortable with having this autonomous entity control your money. And that is a normal feeling. So there will always we've capitalized on a couple of these things that lead one maybe at this point to believe that AI will never be perfect, right? And it probably won't be, because perfection is the enemy of progress, and efficiency is bad for volatility, and volatility is how we make our money. Because if some people disagree on something, congratulations, your opinion is now money. Your opinion is valuable that you disagree with the crowd. You need that as a human being. And to break it down even further into like atomic components here, AI is not a part of the human world. It just isn't. There's always going to be inefficiencies. So what I would say is the risks, to go back to the question, are A, you're probably not going to be the first to upside potential. So accept that you're buying into a green candle that already appeared, right? Because AI got to it first. But on the other side, accept that if we're going down, it's because AI doesn't know about it yet. So do you want to trust AI to do both of those things at the same time? I don't know. Yes, it'll be first to the punch on a bullish move upward, or maybe even sometimes to a downside move. But as Double Down said, that's not the case today. Today, the case is AI is the cause for the downside move on your portfolio. So yes, you might be quicker to the punch on a bullish movement using AI, but you might be last to the punch on a bearish movement. So decide what the risk is really worth to you. And what I would say cautiously is use AI to find out why things are going great. Use AI to find conviction that things are going well. Probably for now, don't trust AI to tell you when things are going poorly. It's not going to be great at that for the near-term future, because the humans are just chaotic. We are the agents of risk so far, and that's probably not going to change in the next 5 to 10 years. And so that is where you're still very relevant as a human being, is looking at things and saying, I think the AI is wrong. I think the humans are wrong. I think I'm going to buy some puts here because there's a little bit too much. The volatility is a little too low with relation to XYZ circumstance that's happening in the human world. I don't think AI is prepared for this. And that is the risk if you're all in on AI, right? Is that you're betting. It's not going to make you money on the downside for the next 5 to 10 years. I don't think so. So don't be all in on the downside protection that AI might or may not offer.
Beautiful. I really appreciate it. One more question about risk. Really not around what AI can or cannot do. Maybe more of the guardrails that is put around it. Where do you think regulation might come into play around what AI can and cannot do? Or let me phrase it differently, what it is allowed to do and what it's not allowed to do as it pertains to markets?
Yeah, I think I touched on it a little bit there. I think there's going to be some tighter rules around, the algorithms that are created by these AI tools to help prevent some of that manipulation and some of that like faultiness. I think there's going to be a need of like some sort of transparency requirements for major like mutual funds and major platforms, so there's not that like manipulation. So I think that's going to be kind of one of those regulations that's put in place, is that if a major platform or a major mutual fund or AI driven fund is in place, there has to be some sort of transparency in the code where they won't be able to write some rug pull script in there or something like that. And there also has to be AI driven market surveillance to monitor and prevent these unfair trading practices. So I think there's going to be more rules and regulations around it, but there's also with that going to be some opportunity for new startup companies to look at maybe some of the market surveillance and things like that. So tighter rules, some more opportunity. It's always going to be a ever changing landscape.
Yeah, I love that word, market surveillance. That phrase is brilliant because what occurs to me is like a famous headline is the Martha Stewart conviction. She got it. It was an insider. If you're a bit younger, I'll scoop you in. Martha Stewart, the
The
homemaker.
gangster.
Yeah, the gangster
She-
herself. Like she had an empire, right? She had a media empire of homemaker media, and she was invested in everything from biotech to Nvidia, probably. I'm guessing on that one, but she had a Wall Street history. She worked on Wall Street. She worked for investment banking before she had her magazine. So, she's a powerhouse of a character, and I've got opinions on what happened to her. But to keep it, diligent here, clinically, what happened is she got a text from a financial manager, so an asset manager, who said, "Hey, I've got information about this company, this biotech company that did really bad on their FDA results. They didn't get approval, and I think you should sell the stock." So Martha Stewart was on a private plane, and she sold the stock. She got arrested by the FBI, and she had to do all the things you have to do when you get arrested by the FBI, to explain why it was or wasn't her fault, and eventually she went to prison. And it might be obvious by my tone how I feel about that. But the whole point of a financial advisor is so that they take on the risk, they know the law, and they know what they're allowed to share and what they're not allowed to share, and they're supposed to expose themselves to the risk associated with breaking those rules.
He went to
And
jail
Martha
too.
Stewart.
I'm,
Okay,
I'm
okay, okay,
fairly certain it's a big
okay.
thing in my industry. However, uh, still crazy story.
Yeah, yeah, and maybe like I'll keep it kosher here, and whatever happened. Martha Stewart's a free woman now, and thank goodness, because she's doing media work with Snoop Dogg now, and we all love that. But she is solidly in the entertainment sector now once again. But I think there's a conversation to be had there, right, about AI. What if AI gets access to a text or information that is technically insider, and it acts on it? So that market surveillance, that phrase is really, that's going to stick in my brain for the next, I don't know, quite a while. What Double Down just said, because I think that is a huge industry need. If you are and he is, Double Down is in a cybersecurity space, that is a really big business model potentially, where you can offer this, like Bloomberg, say hypothetically, they're like, "Hey, look, we get a lot of texts that we can't act on, and yet we're very greedy and bullish about AI. We need something that can create a wall or a filter between what we're allowed to trade on and what we're not allowed to trade on with regard to AI. Because if we give it free reign, it's going to trade on information it's not supposed to, and then we're on the hook. Then the FBI starts calling us, and they're not going to care. They're not going to put an AI in handcuffs. They're going to put us in handcuffs. So we need something that prevents AI from trading on insider information. Now, how do you define insider information? That is probably a $1 trillion question, because
Yes, sir.
yeah, if you can delineate that, you have the boundary between tradable information and non-tradable information in a nanosecond. And if you can deliver that product, then you've got something that creates conviction around certain trades and then keeps you away from other ones. And then similarly, you can imagine a situation where, okay, it's allowed to hold the insider information, kind of a digital vault of non-actionable insights. And then when something becomes public, it's now tradable information, but you've had it in this vault this whole time. So, and because of the speed that AI offers, you can imagine that vault being very important, right? Because the second it becomes public, humans have to use their eyeballs to read a headline, whereas AI doesn't. And it can transition from it's in the vault to being public and tradable within a nanosecond. And that's a very profitable. I'm blown away by this idea, even because it's a very profitable business model if you can bring that to the table for a company like Bloomberg or Fidelity, where it's like, okay, first of all, the problem is solved. We know what's not tradable. Now, please let us know when it is tradable, because my goodness, we've got the information, we want to use it, and we want to use it faster than the humans, and we think AI can do that. So that is
that is a really promising, regulations are all about opportunity. Let's be realistic, right? When you create bureaucratic red tape, it creates rules that we want to find the way to break. If you tell an athlete, it's like, hey, you're not allowed to use this drug to dope up your sprint time on the 100 meter, they're going to be like, okay, but can I use all of these medications to do it? They're going to begin asking how far they can push the boundaries once they know what the boundaries are. So that's really at the core of the regulatory conversation. Is once you create rules, what you created is a line to toe. And the companies are going to try to toe that line they're going to get as close to that line as they possibly can to maximize alpha and profit. So that's, in my opinion, that's really at the core of the regulatory discussion.
Beautiful. I appreciate your guys' insight. I do want to move. We're coming up on 2 hours. So I want to move to wrap this up. So I have a couple more questions for each of you that I want you both to answer them. Just so if people want to skip to the end, I didn't tell them in the beginning, so only if you're here you get this information. But just couple, like, if you had to bullet point kind of your key takeaways on AI's role in trading, just quick summary so people could, if they wanted the TLDR of how this went.
Yeah, I'll go first. Okay, let me summarize this real quick. AI is a powerful tool, but it's not a complete substitute for human insight. I always say keep emotions out of trading, but keep insight in it. There's that delineation there. But I think, traders who combine AI with their discretionary judgment will have the edge until, AI evolves into having that own discretionary judgment. Let me think of advice for traders. Advice for traders who want to integrate AI maybe into their strategy. Start small. Look for like some AI-driven screeners and alerts before really diving into algo trading, if that's what you want to do. Make sure if you do go that route, you understand the AI model. Learn how they generate their insights before you actually act on them. Don't blindly trust any tool, whether it's Alloy's tool, my tool, brokers' recommendations. They always give you those. Don't blindly trust anybody for anything ever, especially AI. It's inherently wrong half the time. Stay adaptive. As AI evolves, so should you in your trading approach. Look into following like AI-driven communities that'll help you kind of stay ahead of the game. There's some really cool subreddits around AI, like prompt generation subreddits that you should look into if you're looking into building AI tools. There's some subreddits there. Use AI to help you along your journey. But yeah, stay informed and try to use it to your advantage as much as possible.
Yeah, to reverberate off of that, like I think if you're young, congratulations. You're in a great time to absorb as much of this as you possibly can. So if there's anything in your brain that says this is boring, or you're a personality that likes to go against the grain quite a bit, and you're like, oh, everyone's talking about this, I'm tired of hearing about it, I don't want anything to do with it. Don't shed that perspective as quickly as possible. Get involved with AI, get comfortable with it, dip your toes in as much as you're comfortable doing. It is absolutely the future, and Double Down to Win is absolutely correct. Don't blindly go into anything. Look, you've got plenty of time to experiment with these things and decide what works for you. So long on your time that you can spend on these things. I'm long on the time you have to experiment and appreciate these tools, so don't rush into anything. Then kind of step 2 is, or bullet point number 2 is, efficiency is great, but it has a downside in that eventually there's a diminishing return to efficiency and something is wrong. So be really good. I've talked a little bit about forming thoughts into language.
continue getting good at that, and then turn that language into strongly held opinions. Those opinions are going to hurt you or they're going to help you, but you'll get better at forming more accurate opinions about the way the world's headed and the way the markets are headed. And that is a good dojo to be practicing in right now. So if you see that AI is playing a larger role in the markets, and you're starting to think that things are too efficient, we're capitulating at these prices a little bit too much, and we've got a meeting coming up with the FOMC, or there's something going on in another country that could disrupt U.S. politics or our markets, it's a great time to be opinionated about those things. Don't let naysayers tell you that you're wrong, because that disagreement is your companion, and you've got AI to ask questions about that opinion. So if you think that, hey, we need rare earth metals, it looks like we're a little bit short on that relative to other countries, and people are saying everything's fine and everything's good, and maybe we're in 2030 and AI is playing such a big role in capitulation and stability in the pricing of everything, don't tell yourself that means everything is certain. Tell yourself that means something is off, because that means a big volatility play is on the way if we're wrong. Markets are never flat for very long. They usually move. So when they are flat and there is efficiency, look for disagreement. You want to be a contrarian to AI in the future. You want to look for where it's wrong. The other thing is the third bullet point, if you will, is maybe half related to what we're saying, but it's kind of topical. I've been talking to a lot of people, and a lot of young people are really apprehensive because they have so much uncertainty. So what I'll say is we're in a really interesting era where uncertainty can be slowly morphed into conviction through the use of AI in an accelerated manner. Before, I mean, just imagine if all I had was NBC, CNBC, and CNN and Fox, my conviction was still kind of scattered even after doing research. We're no longer in that world. So use these tools to turn your nervousness, especially if you're young, turn your nervousness into convictions. You have the tools. You're so lucky. You're so lucky. And so take advantage of these things as much as you can and find your conviction while you're still young, because the sooner you get into that habit, the sooner you're retiring at age 40 or 45, and gosh, maybe earlier in some circumstances. I might be underselling the market as a whole and your abilities, but there's a saying, right? Youth is wasted on the young. The idea behind that statement is when you're young, you're nervous, you're unsure of everything. We are headed toward a very exciting future where you have tools to create conviction. That wasn't true before. We had to rely on, without getting too political, we were relying on governments, we were relying on media, we were relying on grandparents or parents with older or outdated perspectives. You don't have any of those challenges right now. Please take advantage of this while you can. You are very lucky. So that's my 3 points.
Beautiful. I think that is a perfect place to wrap a bow around this whole thing. So just for anyone who's left over here, what's the best way that people can follow what you guys do, maybe inside after hour, but also outside of it?
Yeah, I've got after hours. I've got my Twitter linked that will kind of give you insight on what's going on with my company. But most of what I do in my trading is just for after hours. I don't really do anything else outside of that. I'm, like I said in my interview, I'm more of a businessman. So if you want like business talk, come talk to me. Otherwise, Alloy's a lot better at signals and all of that kind of stuff. So he's a much better actual trader than I am. But yeah, if you want to find information on my bot, it'll be on the Twitter that's linked. But I'll try not to post it too much inside of after hours.
All right. Well, don't sell yourself short because you put out really good stuff. I highlighted one of the things today. So I mean, Alloy's an insane trader. Don't get me wrong, but you put out a lot of good stuff too. So
I appreciate it.
Yeah. Follow Double Down is my first. I would say follow him, and I've got like I got my Twitter linked. I don't talk about Prism too much on the app because I'm a little bit cautious. But if you're
whatever, I'll
interested
do it,
in,
bro. I'll do it. I don't care. It's amazing. It's really good, and people have made a lot of money off of it. So um, I'll put myself out there saying I think it's amazing. I think people should take a look at it, and it's helped so many people in the Discord make a lot of money, but also understand different aspects of the market that aren't talked about as much. So I'll throw that out there about Prism, and
I,
I'm putting it in the post.
I
I don't care.
appreciate that tremendously. Yeah, I got my Twitter linked. I'm Alloy 2077 on is this yeah, that's my Discord name. So if you want to shout, reach out if you want to send a friend request, I'll probably accept it. Um I've got a Discord. It's it's for really dedicated traders. We don't want Obviously we don't want gamblers in there. We want people asking good questions. We're training an AI here. So we want people who know what they expect out of the market and have realistic expectations. And if you're one of those people, we would be thrilled to have you as a part of our community. It's growing really fast. So send me a friend request on Discord. Find me on Twitter. And I'm excited to learn more about everyone's perspectives. So you've got it's a give and take. I'm excited to learn more about what people are expecting, what they want, and I love talking to each one of you. So the links are available. Alloy 2077 on Discord. That's the nutshell.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys both for hopping on this episode. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Learned a lot. Maybe getting less scared or less terrified as the minutes go on here. But but thanks everyone for tuning in. Again, this was the first episode of the podcast that is not an interview. So was really excited to do this, and stay tuned. We have more fun stuff coming.
I love your series. Thank you so much.
Same.
Yeah.